Have you ever wondered how bad the front man from Squid Games really is? Because while in Season 1 he seemed like a really bad guy who enjoyed watching people suffer, in Season 2 we saw him go undercover in the Squid Games and go out of his way to actually help people. We saw him open up as a person to Gi-hoon and some of the other players he bonded with, and we saw him share some of his actual life story with them. And it almost seemed like the closer he grew to these players as their peer, the more he seemed to show empathy and humanize these players. So much so that it's made me wonder, is the front man actually redeemable? Can he turn over a new leaf and by the end of this story walk away a good guy? Not even a hero, but just not a bad guy anymore? Or has he done too much in the past? Has he killed too many players in all his years of being the front man? Has he killed too many guards? Kidnapped too many people to make him redeemable in the slightest? That's what we're going to talk about today. No matter how Season 3 plays out and how they end his story, I want to take a look at all the good and all the bad that this character has done, and put it all on the scales of morality to see if it's possible for him to once again be a good guy. And surprisingly enough, only 5% of everybody that watched the last video was actually subscribed. So before we start, go down and grab that subscribe button by the throat, then kick the like button in the shin, because you are not going to want to miss out on all the fun Squid Games videos we'll be making. I want to do a massive Dalgona cookie challenge where each of you get a random shaped cookie in the mail so we can all participate in the biggest focus group to figure out which cookie shape is actually the hardest. How many of you that get triangle would crack it on accident? And how many of you could actually cut through an umbrella in 10 minutes? But that's a challenge for another day. Today, I want to look at the morals behind one of the most intriguing villains of modern television. Lee Byung-hun recently has spoken about how difficult, along with how fun it was, to play 3 different characters all at the same time. He is the front man. He is Young Il, the fake player number 1 persona, and then he is his true self, Inho. All 3 of these combined make quite the fascinating person. Now, I think that we should go through everything chronologically, starting with Inho just as a regular person. Before he joined the Squid Games, he was actually a South Korean police officer. He was a good guy. He served in the force during his prime and gave them the best years of his youth. At some point in the past, Junho, his brother, needed a kidney transplant, and Inho didn't hesitate to donate his own kidney to help his brother. And then later, he fell in love with a woman and got married. One day, his wife became very sick and needed a liver transplant, and during some of the medical tests, they learned that she was also pregnant. And his wife was insistent that they give birth even if it was dangerous for her, but as time passed, her condition got worse and they struggled to find a donor for the transplant. Inho ended up borrowing as much money as he could find, but it still wasn't enough, and one of his old friends loaned him a large sum of money to try to help, but the police saw it as a bribe and it got him fired on the spot. Having no other options, the Squid Games found him and took advantage of his desperation and invited him to participate as a player in the 2015 games. And he accepted. Even though it was a sick and twisted game and the prize money was wrong, it was blood money, he was determined to win it to help him save his wife and child. Now, there's kind of a plot hole moving forward. For some reason in Season 2, Junho's mother mentions that it's the 5-year anniversary of Inho's wife's passing, and since Season 2 takes place in 2023, that would mean that she died in 2018, 3 years after Inho won the Squid Games and got all that prize money. But that doesn't add up. It seems like she died while Inho was playing in the 2015 games, and that's why he chose to become the front man, because when he got out, she was already gone and the prize money was worthless in saving her. But if she actually did die in 2018, that means Inho used the prize money to get her the liver transplant and saved her for the time being. But there's no mention of what happened to their baby, so maybe it didn't make it, or maybe there's a little front man junior somewhere out there. And then I guess they lived off the prize money for 3 years and then she died? But when his mother talks about not being able to help her in the hospital when she was on her deathbed, it seems like they were referring to 2015 when they first realized there was an issue. I guess it's a little bit of a gray area. But either way, I think before the Squid Games, Inho was a good person. Unfortunately, bad things happen to good people, and when he turned to the Squid Games to get financial help, I think that changed him. The director of the show, Lee Byung-hun, said that Inho was desperate and most likely playing unfairly, using every advantage he could to win the prize money. This means he most likely became a killer in the games. Just like we saw him in Season 2 not hesitate to kill a player to survive, I'm sure that he did the same multiple times in the 2015 games as well. He ended up winning the Squid Games, but at what cost? It changed him. He was a killer now. And like I said, the whole period from him winning to 2020 is a bit gray, but we assume his wife and child died while he was in the games, and by the time he got out, there was no way to use the money he won everyone to try to save them. Now, originally, we all assumed that Inho was approached by Ilnam after he won in 2015 and they made a proposition to him to become the frontman. But rewatching season 1, it's so weird that in 2020, Junho and Inho's mother became worried about him when he stopped answering their phone calls. It had been a while since they had seen him, as if they had seen him a month ago and he didn't show up to family dinner night or something. I'm so confused on when he became the frontman. When the VIPs show up in season 1, he has to introduce himself as if it's his first time and explain what his role in the organization was. Has he only been the frontman since 2020 when he went missing? Because if he hasn't, and he's been the frontman since he won in 2015, that means he's back and forth, keeping up both personas, and for some reason just dipped in 2020. But that doesn't make sense either. When Junho first went to look for him, we see books on his desk about the theory of desire. This theory proposes that desire comes from a lack of something, and relating to the frontman, it seems like this would be the loss of his family that creates a hole in him, which he has the desire through power or others' suffering to try to fix that wound. The loss of his wife and child has defined who he has become. The absence of them has caused him to grieve in a way that's become detrimental not only to himself but now to so many others. Having the prize money after he won the games couldn't fix this hole, this lack of his family. It couldn't bring them back from the dead. I wonder when Inho learned of his wife's passing, if it happened while he was in the games. Because if so, it feels like when the games let the players all return to their depressing realities where they were in debt with no reason to stay there and it basically gave them no choice but to return to the games, I wonder if Inho went home and instead of debt he was met with, it was the sadness and grief and loneliness waiting for him. And like so many others, it drove him right back to the games where he took on the job of being the frontman. I can't help but think he must have still felt like the whole world had turned against him even after he won now that his family was dead. And going back to the theory of desire, I wonder if the director was insinuating that Inho became the frontman to chase his desire of family, to repeat his trauma through others' suffering in an environment that he can now control in hopes of helping him process or maybe forget about it entirely. I think his view of the world turning on him is what turned Inho into the frontman, giving up on humanity as a whole. This is what turned him into the person we know him as currently. And since his job as the frontman, he has done a lot of bad. Even if he was only the frontman since 2020 when he went missing, that's still 455 players killed at his hands each year. That's 1,800 people dead. But if he actually was the frontman starting the year after he won his games, then that's 3,600 players dead. But the thing is, some bad guys don't believe that they're the bad guy. They believe that they're actually doing good, whether they convince themselves on their own accord or whether it's a mentor that brainwashes them. And with Inho, his justification, his excuse for why the Squid Games are not wrong is because he claims that all of the players are there because they want to be. He gives them an option to leave and they stayed, so technically he's not forcing them to play in these death games. But honestly, I think that's just what he has to tell himself to go to sleep at night, especially when he first took on this role. And it's not hard to see how much he actually enjoys watching the games. Watching all of these players die, it doesn't seem like he has any emotions or sympathy as they get eliminated. I mean, we literally watch him, each Squid Game, sit down in his private quarters, make himself a little drink, turn on his music, and set the vibe to watch Red Light Green Light each year, which statistically has the highest amount of player deaths. That's kinda messed up. But in season 2, we saw a completely different side of him. He went undercover as a player in this year's game simply to get close to Gi-hoon and do damage control so he can't mess up more of the games. But in doing so, he showed us, the audience, that there may still be some good left in him. We saw him open up and tell Gi-hoon his life story, bringing all that trauma back to him. This was probably the first time he had ever told anyone about this, and we can see how much he truly cared for his wife, and we get to see him make friends and bond with a lot of the other players too. We get to see him take care of Jun-hee since she was feeling the effects of being pregnant in the games. And I kind of wonder if he showed her special treatment because she reminded him of his wife. But there were so many times where we saw him lose himself in these games, getting truly excited and happy when his friends would survive. Lee Byung-hoon said that just as much as Inho was pretending to be Il-young, player 01, just the same he was subconsciously enjoying the games here. And I'm really surprised that he went as far as he did. It got to to the point where Gi-hoon was starting a literal rebellion against the Squid Games, and Inho was right alongside him, killing pink guards and storming the castle. They almost made it to the control room too. He really waited until the very last second to abandon ship. It was like Inho got lost in this new persona, completely abandoning being the bad guy. I think making friends and possibly socializing and being somewhat happy for once was actually good for him. It was probably the first time he had made friends and had fun since his wife had passed. I mean, even Ilnam, the old man, wanted to play in these games just to relive all the childhood fun before he died. I think part of the front man wants Gi-hoon to be right. I think he wants Gi-hoon to find a way to prove there is still good in humanity and that it's worth saving, because right now Inho believes the opposite. But I just couldn't help but see that glimmer of hope in his eyes throughout all of the last season. I don't think he could have completely abandoned being the bad guy if he chose to finish the rebellion and put an end to the games. I think they would have killed him, and he knows that. It sucks that he turned around and killed one of his friends, Jung-bae, though. Lee Byung-hoon said that Inho was shaking here when he did that, and he wasn't confident in doing so, but he thought that it had to be done to teach Gi-hoon a lesson. And in these shots we see of him in season 3, it looks like he's teary-eyed, like he is so sad. Is he realizing that he is the bad guy? Has all of the emotions of everything finally caught up to him? Sometimes, when something traumatic happens to a person, they close themselves off from the world. They put up these protective barriers and hide their emotions to prevent themselves from getting more hurt. But as time passes and they make friends and put themselves in a new environment, eventually their guard comes down. And when it's been a long time, years maybe, sometimes these emotions can overwhelm them and confuse them and make them break down in tears for no reason and make them question their actions. I really think we're going to see Inho having a huge moral dilemma in season 3. Gi-hoon is the protagonist and should ultimately win in the end. The actors and directors both have said that the end will be shocking, a little happy, and a little sad. And this kind of sounds like a sacrifice. With how many Inho has killed, possibly thousands, I don't think it's possible for him to walk away at the end of this show being a hero. But I do think that he can do something so selfless to save someone else, and in doing so, sacrifice himself, and in turn, will have died on the right side of history. I can't help but think that Gi-hoon will help find the good in him just enough to convince him to help put a stop to these games once and for all. Before he was the front man, he was a good person, and life dealt him a bad hand, and in trying to fix things, he became a different person. He was warped by his perception and circumstances, and became bad himself. But I think Gi-hoon might be good enough to help save him. I wouldn't be surprised if Inho's story ends with him being a good guy. Let me know what you think about this. I will see you soon in the next one. Peace.